Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a different video to usual, where I attempt to refit my own bathroom as a total novice DIYer who knows nothing about really plumbing or anything like that. So yeah, bit of a different video, but I thought I'd film it anyway, partially just to sort of play about with while I'm, give me something to do while I'm doing all the work, and because it could be quite entertaining or interesting or educational. I don't know how this is going to go. But yeah, this is my ensuite bathroom. Thankfully I've got two bathrooms, so I don't have to keep this one operational. I can just rip it out and use the other one. But yeah, it's needed done for quite a while. It's always been a little bit scruffy. The paint isn't bathroom paint. It's from the previous owners. I've never painted it. So it gets like streaks on the wall. The flooring's absolutely rubbish. It's like lino strips that are stuck down, just self-adhesive ones, but they don't line up properly and there's gaps in the middle and it's peeling up, so that needs changed. The sink needs changed anyway because there's a big scratch in the porcelain, so it gets like mold and stuff growing around it. You can't really clean it easily. And I kept putting it off because I didn't need to do it. I had other things to do and all that sort of stuff. But then a few weeks ago, the toilet drain decided to come apart, which was inside that wall cavity. And it basically meant that to get to it, to fix it, I had to cut a big hole in the wall. Now, as I mentioned, I don't know what paint this is. It was done by the previous people. So I don't know which paint colour this is to repaint that patch when I fill it. So I'd have to repaint the whole room anyway. So I was thinking about it. I was like, if we've got to repaint the whole room, replace all the flooring, replace the sink, why not just go the whole hog and just redo it properly? Now, I'm not going to redo the shower. That's fine. It could do with like maybe being resealed and regrouted. It's just getting a little bit old. And I could probably do with a new shower screen because that one's pretty rubbish. But I'm going to leave that for now. What I'm going to be doing in this video and is this project, I'm going to take out the toilet and sink, remove all the pipe box behind it, and put in new vanity units that we'll take a look at. And I'm also going to replace all this rubbish lino flooring with brand new luxury vinyl tiles, so that'll be much nicer. So yeah, don't know how this is going to go, but it should be fun. So let's go and take a look at what we'll be putting in. So now let's take a look at all the stuff we're putting in. So first of all, we have vanity units. These are grey Avola, that's the colour, made by Hudson Reed. I bought these from Victorian Plumbing. They seem okay. I don't know what sort of brand it is really, I've not heard of them, but they seem really good quality. The laminate seems decent, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. You know, it's got soft closed doors as standard, that sort of stuff, so it seems good. I've got the two main units. I've got a deeper sink unit and a shallower toilet unit. So they'll sit back from each other, they won't be totally in line, but that's just because the space I've got is quite limited. So if I used a full depth toilet unit, it would just out too much in front of the shower. So I decided to get a slightly smaller toilet unit, but they should look fine together. And then in front of the toilet unit there, it's just a little bit of filler panel. That's just because the space I've got to fit it in is 1300 wide. Each of these is 600 wide, and they didn't do any pre-made units that would really give me a satisfactory 1300 wide assembly. So I decided to get this and put a filler plate in. I'll just fill up a 10 centimetre gap, and that'll be fine. They did do, I could have bought two 500 units and a 300 unit, and that would have technically fitted, but it would have meant the toilet was far too close to the wall, so I didn't work with that, didn't want to do that, so I've done this instead, so that should be fine. I'll just have to put that filler panel in. As for other things, we've got the sink. This is just another Hudson Reed one. It's just a sort of 600 wide sink that sits nicely in the unit, so it sits nice and flush with the top. It looks really good. Got a Hansgrohe pop-up waste. That's just very basic. That's got the sink. I've also bought a Hansgrohe tap. That's not arrived yet, but that should be here hopefully the next couple of days, so that'll go in there. Just a sort of standard mixer tap. And then down here, we've got the cistern. So this is a Gerberit cistern. Seems like a decent brand. And the plan for that is that should go inside the toilet vanity unit. So it's a concealed cistern, so that'll mount inside this unit here. The top wooden panel can pop off for maintenance, and you can access the cistern through that slot in the front, so it should be quite easy to maintain. And yeah, that should be pretty good. And there's a nice sort of chrome flush button that'll drill a hole into the front of the vanity unit and mount that in there. So that should be really good. So next up we have the flooring, and I've gone for QuickStep LVT. This is luxury vinyl tile. There's other brands that people might know better, such as Carndine and Antico. QuickStep's just another brand. It was a bit cheaper, and I quite like the look of it. Plus this stuff interlocks. With LVT you get different styles. You either get ones that are just separate panels that you need to glue down to a base, or you get ones like this that can interlock almost like laminate, they all click together. So I decided to go for that because that'll be a lot easier to install as a DIYer. I can just lay the underlay down, click the panels together, and then have a floating floor. That's much easier than trying to use the actual tiles where you have to essentially glue them down and, you know, be really careful and get it perfectly level. So this just seems a bit more forgiving, so that's why I've gone with that. And it's really nice, it feels really solid. It does almost feel like tiles. I didn't really want to go with lino again just because it feels a little bit cheap. I just wanted something a bit more premium, but I also didn't want to go with actual like ceramic tiles because they're a pain to lay. You've got issues with them cracking if you don't lay them quite right, and they're quite cold when you stand on them. You know, if you come out of the shower, you're walking to the bathroom barefoot, a tiled floor can be quite cold and slippy. Whereas this, like, is really grippy to stand on and also feels quite warm to stand on, so it's really, really nice. So it'll be really exciting to try this out and see what it's like. So now here we have the toilet I've gone for. And this could either be an amazing idea or a terrible idea. Because, yep, it just looks like a toilet. But you might notice down there, that's a bit mains flex coming out of it. Because, yes, I've gone for one of those Japanese-style bidet toilets with all the functions. I was toying with the idea, but thought, nah, it's a bit silly. But then one of my friends found out I'd been toying with the idea and kind of persuaded me to get one. So, yeah, if you're watching this, well, he will be watching this. This is your fault. So, yeah, decided to go for one of these sort of Japanese-style toilets. I've used one before from Grow It, and it was really, really good. But the problem with that one is it's a wall-hung toilet. And a lot of the high-end ones are. That's great for commercial installations and where you want to have like a really clean floor underneath, make it really easy to clean around. And essentially what that means is you have a big metal frame in the wall or inside the unit, and the toilet hangs off of that, so it doesn't sit on the floor at all. But I'm not a joiner, and I don't trust my skills to not have the toilet fall off the wall. And I imagine if I had guests over it and the toilet fell off the wall on someone, I probably wouldn't be very popular. So I wanted one that would stand on the floor. The problem is trying to get a floor standing one that doesn't look hideous. In the UK in particular, we have quite tight regulations around water. And one of those regulations means that water going into a toilet has to go through an air gap. You can't just have a mains water supply connected directly to a toilet, because if there was a drop in mains pressure, it could suck water out of the toilet and put it into the drinking water, which wouldn't be ideal. Which is why in the UK you'll never see a toilet flushing directly off the mains like you see in other countries. You'll always have a cistern. These bidet toilets also have to have a similar sort of setup, and most of them do it by putting a tank in the toilet seat. So you'll have a sort of tank at the back, and then the seat will slope down to the front. And I just think they look really silly. I don't like the look of them. Especially if someone doesn't realise it's a sort of Japanese-style toilet. They'll just look at the toilet and go, why does it look so stupid? Because it's got this huge raised bit at the back. Whereas this one has a tank, you know, to comply with the regulations, but it's set down inside the porcelain base, and then it pumps the water up. So that just looks a lot better. You know, it looks like a normal toilet. Now this particular one here I bought from betterbathrooms.com. It's also available from Appliances Direct, although it's the same parent company. And they brand it as Purificare, but that just seems to be their own brand. So it is a sort of own brand product, but it's also quite cheap. Whereas that Grower one I mentioned before, the wall-mounted one, was about £1,600, and they tend to go up from there for other brands. This was only £450, and that was to get the rounded one. The square sort of fronted one was only about £400, but I've got very limited floor space, so actually just cutting the corners off and going for the rounded one, even though I prefer the look of the squared one, the extra £50 is probably worth it just to take up slightly less floor space. So yeah, it does seem really cheap. Now that could be either really good value or it could be terrible. You know, it could explode and pour mains water everywhere, but hopefully it'll be fine. I did a little bit of digging, and it seems that this is made by an OEM called Ocean Well. So I did a bit of look at that, and it seems like a fairly big company that makes, you know, these styles of toilets, and then obviously Better Bathrooms have bought it in and rebranded it to sell it, you know, as their own brand. It's, you know, it's common, it's a white label product. However, I also did a bit of digging around and looking at other toilets like this, and I found a couple of other companies in the UK selling what looks to be an identical product under their own brands. So they're also buying the same white label product and rebranding it. However, those companies were charging over £1,000 for it, or, you know, £900 to £1,000 for one that looked very similar to this. So the way I'm sort of looking at it is, assuming it's the same white label product, and it must be, it looks identical. If these other companies are looking at it going, this is good enough for us to charge £1,000 for it and it won't upset customers who buy it and get disappointed, then surely it can't be that bad. So yeah, this will be quite fun to install because it's got all the features. You know, you can lift that up there. It's got a really nice soft closed seat, but yep, of course it's got a remote control, but that's wall mountable, so that sits beside it as a control panel almost. Loads of manuals and stuff in there. It's got, you know, hot water jets, cold water jets, adjustable temperature. It's all electric heating, so you just give it a cold feed and it'll heat itself. It's got built-in air dryer. It's even got like a sort of night light feature, so it can sort of light up the bowl. It seems pretty cool. So yeah, it could be an absolute disaster and explode and pour water everywhere, or it could be quite cool. So yeah, we'll see how we install this later. So yeah, that's it there. And at £450, it seemed like a sort of fun little thing to try out, see what it's like. What can go wrong? Probably a lot of things, but yeah, we'll see. So yeah, nice soft close lid. That creaky noise is just the plastic on it. It won't normally creak. But yeah, this should be a bit fun to try out. Okay, so now I suppose the next stage, that's probably the scariest one, is to get all this ripped out. So all I need to do is I need to take the toilet out, the sink out, take all the pipe box out, and make all the plumbing sort of safe. Cap off all the drains so they don't leak. Cap off all the mains water supply pipes, so again I can turn the water back on and leave it all disconnected. So basically, get it all ripped out to a state where I can work around it and have all the plumbing sort of ready to connect to new stuff. Once all that's out, I'll take the floor out, take the skirtings off, and then I'll get the new flooring down, because if I get the flooring in first, that would be good. And then we can start looking at getting the new units and toilet and sink in. So yeah, it's going to be fun. So time to turn the water off and attempt to remove all this. Okay, so now here we have the absolute carnage that I've caused. So I've ripped everything out, and now we need to look at the plumbing and try and get it all safe so I can turn the water back on, because it's currently off. So if we take a look at what we've got here, on the left we've just got the toilet pan connector. That just comes out and goes to the main drain. I've capped that off, and that can just sit there like that for now. I'll maybe need to move it around or adjust it a little bit, but that can just sit there for now because it's safe, it's capped off. Behind that, coming out the wall, we've then got the water feed to the toilet. Now, that will need slightly changed, because currently that just goes up to where the old cistern used to be. There was a bunch of angles on it that went in. So I'll need to take that off, reroute it, and get it lined up with the new cistern. I'll also need to put a T on there, because the toilet itself now needs a mains water feed directly to the toilet. So I'll need to put a T on there to feed off to that. And I'll probably try and put some sort of isolation valve on there. Rather than capping off all these pipes with just caps and then removing them later, I'll just put isolation valves on them all and turn them off. That'll let me turn the mains water back on. And it'll just be good having mains isolation valves there anyway, so if I ever need to service the toilet or the tap or something, I can just turn it off at the isolation valve rather than having to turn off all the water again. So yeah, I'll rejig the toilet feed slightly and put an isolation valve on there. Next up here we have the feed to the sink and the drain for the sink. And this is probably where I'll need to do the most tweaks. As you can see here, coming out the wall, we've got the hot feed and the cold feed, and they come out. What used to happen is there was an elbow on the end of the cold feed that went up to the tap, and there was also this T-piece or T junction on the hot feed that also went up to the tap. And the tap was connected with solid copper pipes. You can see one of them here because I couldn't get it out, so I just cut it off. And what you'll then see is on the left we've got this T junction with another pipe going off. And this is from when I added the mixer shower. Because there used to be an electric shower here, as I think I mentioned, but I replaced that with a mixer shower which needed a hot feed. So I just took that hot feed from the hot tap using this T. So I'll need to reinstate that, obviously, to feed water to the shower. This pipe is just kind of hanging a bit loose here. That's just because when I first put it in, the pipe box was already here, so I sort of fed it through and wasn't able to clip it inside because it was already boxed in. But now I've got access, I'll probably clip that in a lot neater. So what I really need to do here is just put sort of a couple of elbows back on for the taps and put some isolation valves so I can turn them off and then screw the tap on later. However, right now, the difficulty here is that these protrude quite far from the wall, and that won't fit behind the vanity unit. The vanity unit does have a cutout at the top, but it's really high up, so where this comes out the wall, and I don't really want to move this, where this comes out the wall there'll be a back panel, so these will need to be set back a bit further to allow that back panel to cover them. And then when I put the tap connectors on, I'll deliberately extend them up a bit higher just so they are accessible. I might also cut a bit of the back panel out and make like a removable hatch to service this, but yeah, these will need to be moved further back to the wall. So that shouldn't be too painful. All I really need to do is just cut these pipes a little bit shorter, put the elbow and T back on, and then that should be fine. And I'll probably just replace all the push fit fittings. The whole flat's push fit, so I'm just going to keep using them. But what I've found with push fit is it's generally pretty reliable, but I have had issues when I've reused an existing fitting, I've taken it off and put it back on again. I've then found it to maybe drip, just because the seal's maybe sort of a bit older, a bit harder, doesn't really mold to the pipe after it's been changed. So yeah, I'll replace all the fittings, but I'll basically do something very similar to what was before. Cut these a bit shorter, put an elbow on the cold feed, and a new T on this hot feed to feed the shower and the tap. And then I'll put some sort of tap connector on that we'll take a look at later. Next up at the floor, you can see we have the main drain for the sink. Now this is going to be a bit tricky, I'll definitely need to do a bit of a change to this, because the pipe currently goes down to the floor and runs along that way, it runs along the back wall. But the problem is it comes up and then points straight out into the room. And there's no way that's going to work, because that vanity unit has a plinth on the bottom and a bottom panel that'll kind of cover that where it comes out the floor. So what it actually needs to do is come out the floor and go straight towards the back wall and then come up, and that'll mean it can fit around the vanity unit. The problem with this is it's all solvent welded. So I can't just take these fittings off, especially I can't just turn it around because it's all welded in position. And the problem with, solvent weld is great, it's really reliable, and I'll continue to use it. But the difficulty here is if I were just to cut that off and solvent weld a new fitting on, like a new elbow, and just get it in the right direction, you basically have to cut a new fitting off every time, or a new bit of pipe off every time to fit the new fitting on. And the difficulty with that is it only takes a couple of modifications to the plumbing before you run out of pipe sticking out the floor. And replacing that pipe there will be an absolute nightmare because it runs right under the floor into the main soil stack that's totally inaccessible. So if that got cut off too far down, there's basically no way you can ever replace that pipe without ripping the entire floor up and taking a wall down. So what I'll need to do is I'm going to cut this off very low with the floor and solvent weld on one of these. I bought this from BES, I think they call it a expansion coupler, and essentially all it is solvent weld on the bottom and a compression fitting on the top. So what I can do is I can solvent weld that, and that'll just give me almost like a socket on the floor that can sit there permanently. And then I can easily change the plumbing above and just plug it in. And that means in the future, I can make changes, the bathroom could be rearranged. I or someone else could even come in the future and decide, right, I want the sink on the left rather than the right, and totally rearrange it all. But they won't need to ever keep cutting that vertical pipe down because this will be sitting in there, allowing them to reconnect it. So that seems like a decent solution. I had to go for a grey one, they didn't have stock of the white one, but that'll work fine. So yeah. Be a bit of a pain to fiddle with this, and I'll need to make sure it's really low down because it'll have to sit under the vanity unit. But that feels a little bit safer to me than just continuing to cut this off and solvent welding more on, and then eventually you're gonna run out of pipe. So yeah, I'll need to do that as well. So that'll be a fun adventure because I've never done solvent weld before, so let's see how that goes. So yeah, that's gonna be a fun adventure. So time to go and do all that. Okay, so now I'm back after redoing all the plumbing and stuff, and we're now ready to sort of move on to the next step. So let's take a look at what I've done here. So first of all, let's see what we've done for the taps. As I mentioned before, these used to stick out too far from the wall and would get in the way of the vanity unit. So I've cut them back so they're more flush with the wall now, so they're far enough back that the vanity unit can sit in front. Then to connect the taps up, it was a little bit tricky because I've gone for a Hansgrohe tap, and it uses a 3/8 inch fitting, which seems to be more common in Europe, whereas most stuff in the UK seems to use either a 1/2 inch or I think it's a 3/4 inch or something. I don't understand imperial measurements. A fitting like that, so a 3/8 inch fitting is quite hard to get in terms of like a push fit tap connector. So what I've done instead is I've used a pair of these. I've got a spare because I didn't realize it was a pack of 2, so I need to return these. And essentially it's just a copper stem with the appropriate screw thread on it. And that can go into any fitting that can take a copper pipe. And that'll give me the correct screw thread for the tap connector. Unfortunately, the stem is too short to really fit directly into push fit fitting reliably. So what I've done is I've put it into these compression fittings, which also gives me an isolation valve. And then I've put a small copper stem from the compression fitting into the push fit fitting. You can technically put plastic straight into these compression fittings with the appropriate insert, but I just trust using copper with compression fittings more, so I've done that. So what this now means is I've got these 2 tap connectors I can screw the tap onto, and the isolation valves. And this also means I've been able to turn the water back on. The water's back on now, no leaks at all. And then I can connect the tap on, turn these valves on, and I won't need to turn the water off and drain water out the system and flood the place again like I did last time. So yeah, that's there for the taps. And as before, we've got this feed that goes off to the shower. Next up down here, we've got the cold feed to the toilet. All I've really done is I've just basically cut this back and put an isolation valve on, and I'll need to work out what I'm going to do with the rest of the pipe work. It'll need to come along to the left and then go up into the cistern, and then I'll need to tee off it at some point to go into the toilet itself. So right now it's just got an isolation valve that's shut off so I can work from there. When I first did this, I just tried cutting the existing pipe off, putting the new push fit connection on and seeing if it worked. And it did, but unfortunately the old push fit fitting, the one in this position here, it had a slight leak. It wasn't like a drip, it was just almost like the top of it just got wet if you touched it. It was like very slowly weeping out. And I hadn't actually changed any of the connections on it, I hadn't removed any pipe. So I don't know if it's always been like that, because it was such a slight leak, but I just didn't trust it, so I've taken it out and put a new one in, so that's all fine. So yeah, that's the connection for the toilet. And then the final change I did was the waste pipe for the sink. As I showed before, this was previously just a big solvent welded thing all the way down to the floor, and it just went under the floor all solvent welded together. And as I mentioned, I didn't want to cut this back and just solvent weld more pipe on, and then in the future you couldn't really change it. So what I've done is I've solvent welded this compression fitting on, and I've currently just got it capped off with this white cap. But what I can do is I can build up new pipe work for the sink once I've got the cabinet in and I know where it's going to go, and I can just drop it into here and fit it into this compression fitting. So it's almost like a sort of demarcation point. I can like unplug this pipe work, redo it all, put it in, so that feels a lot safer, so that's there. And it seemed to weld on absolutely fine. Except the first time using solvent weld in it, yeah, seemed to be fine. So now that all the plumbing's sorted, the next thing to do is sort all the flooring. So as I mentioned, I'm using LVT flooring, which requires a slight expansion gap around the side. I think it's about 5mm. So I can't really butt it straight up to the skirting boards because you'd have to leave a gap and you'd have to put like some sort of edging trim in, and it just seemed a bit nasty trying to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all the skirting boards off, lift up all this old flooring, put the LVT down, leaving a gap around where the skirting board would sit, and then I'll put the skirtings back on top of the LVT so the expansion gap's hidden under the skirting. I'm hoping I can reuse the existing skirtings if I just really nicely sand them down, clean them up and repaint them. If not, I'll just have to buy new skirting boards. It depends really how cleanly they come off, but yeah. Time to pull the skirtings off and get this old floor lifted. Okay, so I've now removed all the flooring and skirting boards. That was a bit of a nightmare, because what seems to have happened is these skirting boards have definitely been taken off before. The previous owner did mention there had been a flood in this bathroom and it had been redone, and you can definitely tell because the floor's got like a patch where it's been changed. So I think what's happened is they've taken the skirtings off when they've done that, and then they've glued them back on, because the skirting boards had nail holes but no nails in them. And what I think's also happened is when they've tried to lever it off previously, they've cracked some of the plasterboard, then they've glued the skirting back to the cracked plasterboard. So when I've tried to pull it off, it's pulled half the wall off with it. So that's a bit annoying. I mean, it should be fine. I mean, the skirting will cover any of the damage cosmetically. So as long as I can fix the skirting back on, we should be okay. I also said I was going to potentially reuse the existing skirtings, but they are a bit scruffy, so I might just buy new ones. I'll see how I feel. If I can like restore those, I'll try and do it, but if not, I'll just buy new ones. But yeah, skirtings are removed, and I've removed the floor as well. The flooring was absolutely horrible because it's like this, I think it was like peel and stick vinyl. So the floor is absolutely covered in glue. So I've actually covered the floor in like talcum powder just in an attempt to like make it less sticky so I can actually walk on it without like literally ending up covered in glue. So that seems okay now. So the next step is to get the new flooring down. So that flooring has a separate underlay, so I need to lay the underlay down and lay the flooring on top. Now this is going to be slightly trickier than I first thought, because my initial plan was to put all the flooring in throughout and then get the cabinets in. But I've read the manual for the flooring and it says not to lay heavy cabinets on top of the floor. It seems to be due to that expansion gap they talk about. You're meant to leave an expansion gap around the room because it's going in as a floating floor. And they're saying if you put cabinets on it that are heavy, it'll kind of almost act like having a wall, which does make sense. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to bring the cabinets in. Well, I'll lay the underlay in first, because the underlay can go under the cabinets, that's fine. I'll then bring the cabinets in so I can measure out where they're going to sit and potentially mark it on the underlay. And then I'll install the flooring, but only up to the cabinets. What I'll do is I'll try and install it so it's under the plinth of the cabinet so you don't see the edge, but the cabinets won't be sitting all of their weight onto the flooring. So it should be fine. It's just a bit more effort because I can't just floor the entire room. I have to get the cabinets in, measure, and attempt to get the flooring to go up to the cabinet and sit under the plinth, but not have all the cabinet's weight resting on it. Should still be fine though. Now, as for the toilet, that gets a little trickier because the toilet will have to sit on the floor, because I really don't fancy trying to cut round a curved toilet in that flooring. So the toilet will just have to sit on the floor. But it does state that in the instructions it's okay to put heavy furniture on the flooring. So I think they're more worried about people having cabinets down an entire long wall, like with the flooring, whereas potentially having a heavy toilet sitting on it's probably fine. Equally, I mean, the toilet's at least in the middle of the room, so it could still expand either side of it. So yeah, the toilet will have to sit on the floor, but I'll try and not have the cabinet sitting on it. So yeah, the next step is get the underlay in and then bring the cabinets in. But there's also now a job that I really don't want to have to do, but I'm going to have to do it, is there's this old tile that used to be behind the sink. I've been putting off taking that out because I just know it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be horrible, messy, break, probably rip half the wall out with it. But that's where the cabinet's going to sit, and the new cabinet's going to sit over that. So I'll need to take those tiles out now, because otherwise the cabinet won't sit flat enough to the wall. So yeah, that's not going to be fun. And then the final thing I'll need to do before I put the underlay in is to undercut these door frames. Because currently the door frames go right to the floor, and it wouldn't be very good trying to cut the flooring around the door frame. So I'll just use the multi-tool to go underneath, cut probably 4 or 5 mil off the bottom of that, and then I'll be able to slide the new flooring under the door frame, and that'll look a lot nicer. So yeah. So yeah, time to get the tiles ripped out, undercut the door frames, and get that underlay in. Okay, so that's the tile now removed, and I've been able to undercut those door frames with the multi-tool. So yeah, the tile was a bit of a nightmare to remove. I bought a really good sort of scraper tool that was, you know, designed to remove tile, and it did work well. And this would be ideal for like smaller tiles. But I think the issue I had was the tiles are so big that trying to, like, you know, they're basically, it was 2 tiles that height. Trying to get behind them, you couldn't easily scrape all the grout off behind them, or the adhesive off behind them all. So they did kind of bring quite a lot of the wall with them. However, it's clearly been patched before, as you can see with this patch in the wall. So I suspect when they've replaced the tiles previously, they've done the exact same thing. But the good thing is that the damage is basically reserved to that patched piece. So hopefully I can just unscrew that bit of plasterboard and just screw a new bit in the same size. So it's not really going to be a big problem. I'm still not sure what I want to do behind the sink. If I'm going to paint it all, it might be a bit of effort just to fill that and get it sanded down to look perfect. But if I end up tiling it or putting on some sort of solid panel, then yeah, you wouldn't see it at all, so that should be fine. So yeah, now the tiles are removed and the door frames are undercut, we can get the underlay in. Okay, so I've now got the underlay in. That wasn't too bad to do, it really just required 2 strips, so it was pretty easy. And then I just had to carefully cut it so it could go under the door frame and, more importantly, into the bit around the shower tray. So yeah, that was fairly painless. I mean, there was one moment when I perfectly measured out the cutout for the shower tray and then cut the wrong bit out, which wasn't exactly the best thing I've ever done. So I had to redo that, but now that's all in, yeah, the underlay's down. All you need to do is have 2 strips, and then you just join them in the middle with a bit of tape, which is what it said in the instructions, so that was pretty easy. So now we need to actually get the flooring down. So as I mentioned earlier, in the instructions it says you're not to put heavy cabinets on top of the floor. So for the next step, I'm going to bring the cabinets in and put them along the wall where they're going to ultimately sit. And that'll mean when I'm measuring the floor panels, I can actually measure them up to the cabinets. I'm not quite sure if I'll put the cabinets in and then measure the floor and lay the floor with the cabinets in place, or I'll measure them, mark out on the underlay, and then take the cabinets out again. I'll see how I get on with both options. But yeah, next step is to get those cabinets in. Okay, so now I've got the cabinets in. So all I had to do was just cut a couple of bits out of the multi-tool to get the pipes through, namely the pipe for the shower and then the pipe for the toilet waste. But that was easy enough to do. And I've now got them sitting in here. So in order to get the same height as the floor, because the plinths on these go really low to the floor, so I wouldn't be able to slide it under if they're sitting straight on the underlay, I've just put some offcuts of the vinyl tiles under there. Well, that's some samples that I got, they're all the same height. So it's sitting on essentially the vinyl tile to keep them round about the same height as the main floor. I might end up using offcuts of the actual flooring just to get slightly larger ones, but that should be fine. And that means that these sit basically the same height as the main floor, but they're not attached to it, so that's fine from an expansion perspective. I've then taken the plinths off both of them, as you can see. So what this means is I can get the new flooring under where the plinth goes, and as long as I leave sort of about 5mm between the unit and the front of the plinth, then that should be fine. So there'll be a 5mm of the flooring under the plinth, but then 5mm before it hits the unit, so that gives a 5mm expansion gap, which is what we need. The same for the toilet unit, that's fine. The only tricky thing will be this sink unit, just down here, where it overlaps about 10 centimetres. So it sticks out proud of the toilet unit by about 10 centimetres. And I don't really fancy leaving a 5mm gap around that lip there, because I'd have to fill it with sealant or something, it would just look hideous. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the flooring just under that corner of the unit there. But what I'll try and do is the unit will be fixed to the wall anyway, and I'll try and pack it with like, you know, these little plastic, I don't know what you call it, spacer things. I saw them in Wix the other day, so I'll probably buy some of them. And just basically make it so that most of the weight of the unit is on that side there and the back of the unit. Fix it to the wall, and then hopefully there just won't be as much weight on the front there. There might be a little bit, but again, it's hopefully fine. You know, it's a tiny little bit of weight on a tiny corner of a tile, so that's hopefully okay. I suspect the main issue is just if you had a whole wall of these, you're not meant to put them on it. So yeah, we'll have a slight bit of the flooring going under that slight overhang there, but then everything else will be sitting under the plinth, so it won't be connected. So yeah, that's all in. So now I need to go away and actually put the flooring in. So yeah, that's going to be fun, because whereas the underlay is quite easy to deal with if I mess up, I've got a huge roll of it. If I mess up a couple of those tiles and don't have any left, that's going to be very expensive to get another box of them. So yeah, need to be very careful here. Cool, so just quickly jumping in here. I've got all the flooring out, and this is something it said to do in the instructions, was that if you've got a couple of boxes, which is what I had here, to get all of the panels out, compare them all and mix them up between the boxes, and then make sure when you're putting them side by side that you don't put two designs that are similar. And I can see what they mean here. What's quite good is this is obviously designed to look like slate, and what they've done a really good job of is making them all look very random, like it's not a repeating design across all of them, they're all quite unique, which is really good. But what you need to do is be careful, because you'll see, for example, some of them like this one here are quite a plain design, like this half. They're essentially two tiles on one plank, they've got a sort of fake grout line in the middle. Up here, this one's quite plain, like it's just quite smooth and grey, whereas like this half here is a lot more sort of stone effect. Similar like with this one here, again, this is quite a big sort of noticeable stone effect on it. So what you need to do is be careful and put ones that are different next to each other. What you wouldn't want to do is accidentally take it out and put all the really rough stone effect ones in, and then move on to the ones that are much smoother, and you see a quite noticeable line down the room. So that's what I'm doing here, just taking them all out, inspecting them all, and trying to sort of pick which ones I want next to each other. And it's also quite good at inspecting them all closely, because this one here, you probably won't see it on camera, but it's got quite a weird sort of scratch down it, sort of from here all the way down the edge. It looks almost like a roller that's gone down it probably in the factory. I mean, that's definitely annoying. I suppose I could probably contact them and get a replacement. But what I'll just do here, especially for convenience, is I'll just prioritise using this one for the side of the room where I need to cut this one in half, and I'll be able to cut that side off. I'll need to be careful and use it at the correct side of the room, because I'll need to cut off the tongue side, not the groove side. So I need to make sure I do it the right way around so it all clicks in. But yeah, that should be absolutely fine. I just need to make sure I prioritise putting that one in where I'm going to cut that piece off, so the damage won't be there. And then that means all the other panels, including the ones I'll end up keeping as a spare, will be, you know, in good condition. So yeah, definitely worth taking them all out, inspecting them all for damage especially, and just making sure that when you're picking them, you're not putting ones with a very similar design next to each other, because yeah, that'll start to look a bit silly. So that was a nice easy task. The much harder task now is to measure that room and work out where I'm going to cut all of these to make them all look decent and line up properly. And my brain is not firing well today, so this is going to be interesting. Okay, so I've done a bunch of calculations and started cutting the planks down. It was a bit tricky working out the width of the room, because technically it's wide enough to fit 4 full planks and then some partial bits down the side, but it would mean the partial bits would be really thin, and it was thinner than the recommended 5 centimetres in a couple of points of the room. So what I've ended up doing is I'm going to go with 3 full planks and then wider partial planks at either side. So this is going to be on the partial ones, it's on the end. So I've cut it down to the right width, and then I've done additional cutouts to make it fit around the door frame. Because what we need is a wider bit to fit into here and under the carpet strip, or the threshold strip, and then it to be a bit deeper here to go under the door frame so it's not visible in the little bits of architrave, but then it's to be not very deep here, like a lot thinner here, so it can settle on the front of the wall. And I'd be measuring out the expansion gap just using another couple of sample pieces, because these are about 4 or 5 mil or so deep. So if I put that against the wall, I can then butt this up against that, and then that gives me a sort of decent measure of the expansion gap. So after cutting all that out, I've been able to get it to work. So if I slide that in there, sort of like that, make sure it's spaced out from the wall correctly, which it seems to be, and I can use the square edge of this and use the other piece a bit more square. Use the square edge of this to butt it up against the wood under there, line it up with this sort of fake grout line, and I can see that's perfectly square with the wall. So yeah, that's worked absolutely fine. So that's now the first piece in. I mean, it's not really an achievement, it's laid there, but that's in there absolutely fine. Over at the cabinet on the left-hand side, you can see it's sitting just in front of the bit wood here, but the plinth will cover that, so that's good. So all I really need to do now, is I need to cut down another plank to fit between the end here and the wall. So that one needs to be cut to be narrower and less long. Once I've done that, then it'll be a lot easier, because I've got three widths of planks that I can just put down straight. I'll need to cut the length of them down, but not need to adjust the width, which is the harder one. So that'll be really easy to do. And I always need to do the other short, narrower plank at the end. So it is pretty easy. So it's not as easy as they sort of showed in the video. In the video, the guy just scores it with a knife and just snaps it with his hands, and it's super easy. I imagine to do like snap them lengthwise, that'll be pretty easy. But to snap a smaller bit off the whole length of the plank is a little bit harder. But it's basically the same deal. You just score it with a knife. I found myself using pliers to help bend it, but you just bend it all, snap it off, and it comes off pretty easily. The only thing I would say is, if you're doing this, wear gloves. Because I didn't read the instructions, so they probably did say to wear gloves, and I just didn't think, because I thought, oh, it's vinyl, what's the worst that can happen? But turns out it's almost fibrous. I probably won't be able to show it on camera, but it's almost like really thin fibres. Your camera probably won't be able to make it out, but it's kind of fibrous on the end. And those are very sharp, as I found out. So my hands are now like covered in those like really sharp spiky fibres, so anytime I touch things, it stings. And I've also very usefully thrown a couple of the offcuts onto my bed just to get them out of the way. So now that's going to be full of spiky bits of vinyl. So yeah, from now on, I'm going to be wearing gloves for this. But yeah, it's actually not too bad. And actually just getting it even just slipped under there and just seeing it like that is really exciting, because it makes it feel like it's all coming together. I'm like, right, that's working, that's possible, it's going to be doable. The other thing I did off camera is I've also changed this carpet strip, or the door threshold, what do you call it? Threshold, door strip, whatever you call it. The previous one, actually after looking into buying them, seemed to have actually just been a carpet edge. Like it's designed to go on the edge of a carpet and not transition to another bit of floor. So that was a bit weird. So I've replaced it with this one that's basically got carpet grips on one side and then nothing on the other side. So it's designed to go between carpet and laminate, it said. So carpet and vinyl will be fine. And it's quite good because it's got a sort of zigzag bit of metal inside it. So even though right now there's quite a gap above the vinyl, what it then says to do is once you're ready, hammer it down with a rubber mallet and it kind of concertinas internally and it'll sit flush with the floor. So yeah, that's a lot neater. So that wasn't too bad. So yeah, time to cut down a lot more vinyl and get the rest of the floor done. Okay, so a bit more of an update. I've got a bit more progress here. And now I've kind of got into the swing of this. It's actually really easy. The first bit was a bit tricky because I was trying to first of all learn how to cut it and do it all, but then now I've actually got it, you know, with some planks down, it's really easy. So what we've got is here we've got the first full plank, and then at the end there's maybe about 35 centimetres of another plank there. And then with all of these I then had to cut the width down because it's a narrow plank at the edge of the room. The next plank here is obviously full width, it's not been cut down, but it's obviously shorter. So what you're meant to do, and it's what I've done, is obviously to get that small 35 centimetre piece at the end, I had to cut it off a plank, and then you're to use the remainder of that plank here. So then I need to cut down another plank to fit in that gap there, and then I'll use the remainder of that to fill in the next one here. And it's all just about using the offcut to start the next row. When you look at the actual videos and documentation of how you're meant to do it, it obviously shows you to use the partial plank on an end and then use full planks throughout the room and then use another partial plank on the end. But because this room's so small, that there will probably actually be the only full length plank I'll be using. Everything else will be partial. But it actually seems to make a lot of sense. It's not leaving much waste at all. I mean, the only waste is actually stuff I've cut off the width. All the lengths get used. And it seems pretty good. And then what it does, it staggers the seams. I'll need to keep an eye on it because what you don't want is to put two seams or two fake or real sort of two grout lines almost too close together. You don't want to have like a line here and the next one have a grout line here. You want to have them kind of spaced out, which is what I've done. There's one sort of here and then one here. So they're kind of spaced out. So you want to keep doing that. So obviously if I find that I've got them aligned in such a way that the lines are getting too close together, I might need to cut extra bits off and throw bits away just to make it line up. But it's actually going really well. I mean, it was sort of thing that took like an hour just to get the first bit down, but I think I could get the rest of the room, apart from the last one that'll need more custom cutting, down. I could get that down in like 20 minutes. And then the last one will maybe take a bit longer just because it has to be cut around the shower tray. But yeah, this is actually pretty easy stuff to put down, so that's really good. And even though I've obviously not got the whole thing down, just standing on this little bit here, it feels really good. It feels a lot like tile. It's really solid, but it's also not quite as cold as tile. It's really, really nice. So yeah, very happy with it. So yeah, time to lay even more of it. Okay, so that's all the flooring now in. And as I mentioned earlier, it went in really well. Much easier to fit than I expected, and I'm so happy with the end result. It feels almost exactly like tile, just a bit warmer to the touch, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's also really grippy, which is good, so I'm not going to go flying on it, which I have done on tiled floors before. Obviously it looks a bit scruffy just now because there's obviously the expansion gap around the side and then nothing under the shower. But I'll be putting all the skirtings on, or get new skirtings and put them on, and they'll hide that expansion gap around the side. The plinths will perfectly cover up the gap there. And then for the bit under the shower, there's just a bit of PVC that goes along the front, but unfortunately they've cut it round the old skirting boards. Rather than putting the skirtings up to it and then putting it solid behind, maybe so it could be removed, they've cut it round the skirting board. And the problem is because the new flooring's thicker, it won't line up with the cutout, so it'll look silly. But it's just basically a bit of PVC that's got like an edge, like a ledge at the top that clips in under the shower tray. So I just need to get a new bit of that, so that can't be too hard to find. So I'll just get that and replace it with a new piece. But yeah, that's all gone really well. Now as for the next stage, most of the plumbing's ready, but I still need to get a waste in for the sink. So I'm going to need to take the cabinet out, fit that, cut out the back of the cabinet to let the pipe run through and get that installed. Those isolation valves I put in, I also put them in a little bit lower than I thought than I meant to put them in. I think I measured the cabinet wrong, so I'll raise them up a little bit as well. And then what I also want to do is replace that damaged bit plasterboard, because as you can maybe see, the cabinets need to fix onto the wall to keep them steady, and two of the fixings are right over that damaged bit of plasterboard, so it's not like I can put the cabinets in really and then change that plasterboard in the future. I'll get a new bit patched in there, and then I can fix cabinets to it, and that should be fine. So yeah, get the cabinet out, fit the waste pipe, adjust the feed to the tap, and replace that plasterboard. But yeah, getting on pretty well with it all. Okay, there we go. So another slight progress update. What I've now done is where those water pipes come out the wall for the taps, I've just extended a bit of copper and put a bit of wood behind some pipe clips, and then fixed all that to the wall, so that's a lot more stable now. So they're not hanging off the pipes anymore, they're actually fixed solidly. Which is also quite good, because when they were previously just sort of suspended by the pipes, using the screw head to try and turn the valve was a bit dodgy and the pipe would all move, so that's now fixed a lot more solidly. I've also got the waste pipe in, so I've just solvent welded a few bits together to give that sort of L shape, whatever you call it. There's a nice slope on the bit at the bottom as well, and that's worked really well because that sort of connector I put on the floor, it just connects straight in there and works really well. And I've just again fixed that back to the wall. And then up here you can also see that I've patched the plasterboard. So that was pretty easy because it was already previously patched, so there's already bathrooms in place. So all I need to do is just cut a new bit of plasterboard to the right size and just patch it in, so that's pretty easy to do. So all I really need to do now is fill around the edge of this, make it good just so it looks decent, so it's ready to paint. I might end up tiling over it if it is hard to like hide this behind paint. We'll see what happens. But yeah, now that's all done, I just need to fill around it, and that'll mean I'm ready to then fix the cabinets back to the wall, because some of the cabinets will need to fix onto that patched plasterboard, so I wanted to get that done first. Once the cabinets are all in, we can then start fitting stuff. So as I mentioned, all the stuff's already there for the sink. The toilet now has a water feed, so all I now need to do is fit the cistern and then do the pipe work for it. So yeah, that's the next two things I need to do. Patch up this plasterboard and fit the cistern. Okay, so now I'm back. I said I was going to fix the cistern in, but I've not done that yet. I've had a slight change of plan. But what I've done is I've sanded all the walls down just so they're ready for the cabinets to go in. And then I fixed all the cabinets to the walls. One of them hit a stud, so I've just gone straight into that with a screw. The others were just into the cavity. So I've tried these new fixings this time, which are zip toggles. These are branded Timco Zip Fix. I'm kind of in two minds with these. Typically I've always used just typical spring toggles or the big expensive grip it fixings, but I thought I'd give these a go. And essentially what you do is you put them into the wall like that, they fold out like that behind the wall, and then you zip this thing along as though like it's a zip tie, and that then holds this inside the wall. You then snap off the zip tie here, and then you can screw into it, and it's sort of reusable. It also feels a bit more substantial than a spring toggle because it's a solid bit of metal behind the wall rather than a sort of butterfly spring mechanism. The only issue was that I had a couple of these, is I put 3 into the wall and I actually ended up using 5 because 2 of them, one when I put it in and snapped the zip tie off, it just fell into the wall. And then the other one when I started screwing in, it snapped off and fell into the wall. So yeah, they do seem pretty good though. Definitely seems more substantial than spring toggles. I think you just need to be a bit careful using them because you have the liability to snap and then fall into the wall. But yep, done that. And that now means that the cabinets are all fixed to the wall, which just really means that if someone was to like climb on them, they're not going to fall over. You know, they are standing on the floor mostly, but I just keep them secured to the wall, and now they're really solid. The next change I've made is to the plinths. Previously, these used some sort of standard plinth clip type thing, where essentially all there was a little sort of plastic bit that stuck out from each plinth on either side, and almost like a plastic slot underneath each plinth on the cabinet, and you just push the plinth straight into the cabinet, and that fixed it in. And you could just pull it straight off again. But my issue here is that when I put the skirting boards in, I'd rather butt them up to the plinths rather than trying to cut the plinth around the skirting board. It just seems much easier. But if I do that, it means I won't be able to pull the plinth off forward once the skirtings are in, because it would hit the skirting board. So instead what I've done is I've replaced all those plinth clips with these magnetic cabinet catches. They're definitely not designed for holding plinths on, but they seem perfectly strong. And what that means is, in particular on the sink unit, what I can do is I can just slide it off sideways and slide it out from under the skirting to get it off, which seems a bit easier than trying to cut skirtings around it or take the skirtings off to get the plinth off. So I've used those magnetic cabinet catches there. What that then means is if you look over here on the side wall, you can see those black catches over here. That's because I need to fix in a filler panel there, about a 11cm filler panel, just to fill in that gap. And I needed some way to mount that. And those original plinth clips actually feel really secure. So by replacing the plinth clips with these magnets, it means that I can get the plinths off easily. It also freed up those original clips that I've now fixed to the wall and to the side of the cabinet. And that then means I can use them to fix the filler panel in. So that should be quite good. You also might notice down here for the toilet cabinet that the plinth's in two halves and there's a bunch of different bits lying around. So this was a sort of tricky thing I had to try and deal with. Because I've got that filler panel at the side, the plinth stopped at the side of the toilet cabinet and didn't go all the way to the side wall. So what I could have either done was just extend the filler panel all the way down to the floor, which I thought might look a bit silly and I'd rather have the plinth there. Or probably the proper way you're meant to do it is order a longer plinth. But they're quite expensive and I'd have to order like a 1.2 metre plinth. And all I needed was an extra 11 centimetres. So what I've done is I've cut the toilet plinth in half, well not quite in half, but sort of into two different parts, so that the gap between the two pieces will be right behind the centre of the toilet, so you won't see it at all. And that then means that the plinth can then extend all the way to that side wall. What this did mean, however, is that of course the original plinth clip was totally useless, and same having a clip on either side wouldn't work because the plinth was now in two parts. So I bought a bunch of magnet catches, basically all they had left in the shop. So I've got those two strong ones attaching it into the side of the cabinet, and then I've got a few smaller ones that are attached onto wooden blocks screwed into the floor. So there's one there, and then one at the side there. And that just means that the plinths can both clip on and are held on a few points, and they seem perfectly secure. So that's kind of what I've done there. And that means that the plinth from the toilet unit will extend all the way to the side wall, and the gap will be hidden behind the toilet. And I just felt that'll make the filler panel look a bit less like a filler panel. Like at least it'll have a plinth there, it'll kind of continue the design on a little bit. So yeah, that's what I've been doing there. And it seems to work okay. I mean, I don't know if that's how you're meant to do it, but it seemed like a perfectly reasonable way to mount them. And it means that they're very easy to get off in the future. In particular for the sink one, because the drain is behind there, if I ever need to access that drain or check on it, it's nice to be able to pop that plinth off really easily. So yeah, that's all done there. The next thing I think I need to do is mount the sink. Because as you can see behind here, I've got all the plumbing already in there, I've got the tap connectors and the drain already in place. So hopefully I can just get the sink in there and connect it all up. So a bit more progress now, we now have a sink installed. And that wasn't too bad to do. It's not all siliconed in yet, it's just sitting there loose because when I get the worktop I'll probably want to silicone it all at the same time. But yeah, it's all in there, sink taps in, waste in, all works brilliantly. And it's a really good motivator actually getting this all in, and now just having one working thing that I've installed, so it gives me a bit more motivation to finish it. So yeah, sink's in there, definitely working really well, no leaks, all seems fine. So the next thing is now to actually get the toilet in. So I've already cut down all the woods just for the panel behind the toilet, and then a filler panel for the side. So that's already done. So what I need to do now is go and get that cistern mounted. Get a cistern in, all the plumbing in, and then we can get the toilet in. Okay, so now I've got the cistern installed. So that's mounted inside the vanity unit there. See down there, there's mechanisms. I've not filled it with water yet. And there's this big long pneumatic pipe, so this goes to the flush button, so I'll need to fit that on once I've got the front panel in place. And then down here we can see the plumbing. It's probably not the neatest thing in the world, but it does the job. Essentially we've got the cold water feed from that fed the old toilet, comes out into the isolation valve as before, comes up into an elbow, comes across into a T, which we'll show in a second, and then comes up into the cistern, so that's fine. That T then comes down on a bit of PEX, then goes into this flexible pipe, and that comes down to the isolation valve and filter for the bidet toilet. It would be nice if I could get, say, one of these T's that had the correct connector for the filter or something, but I couldn't get it in the shop, so I just put a bit of PEX in there and that does the job. You can always change it later. So then, as you can see, I've then got the flush pipe here, cut size. That protrudes just from the front of the unit and fits into the toilet. I've got the pan connector here where the actual connection on the toilet is really deep in. So I've bought this quite deep extension that I'll be putting on, and then that'll go into there. So that should work fine. I'm just trying to make as minimal modifications to what's already here as possible. But yeah, that all seems pretty good. So the next thing is to turn the water on that isolation valve, check, the system fills up and everything and nothing else leaks, and then we can try and get the toilet in. Hopefully this all goes okay. There we go, so I've turned the water on, system's filled up, that's all fine. pretty scary doing that without the toilet connected. Had a bucket there just in case. But yeah, everything seems fine. Nothing's leaking, so that's good. So what I need to do is just get the front panel on here and get the toilet put in. I probably won't film that because it's all the sort of thing that just needs to really just be done in one big go, so I can't really show it in stages. But yeah, hopefully next time you see this, there'll be a toilet in place. And we're back. And if you may notice the video is a bit different. The room's now painted. This is now about 6 months later. I sort of got it all working and then did that thing that I always do with projects where I get it working and then just don't finish it because I've now got the basics working. But yep, it's now 6 months later and we're now finally about to finish it. This is literally to the level where I'm even filming on a new camera now. This is like my brand new camera. My old one was filmed on my old camera, so you'll probably see a change in video and audio quality as well. But yeah, when I last left you, I was just about to fit the toilet, so obviously I've done that now. And if you look down the back, we can see we've got the water connection to the bidet is there going through the filter, that goes into the bottom of the toilet. We've also got the mains connection to the inline RCD there. That's a bit of flex that comes into this cupboard. And in the back of the cupboard here, you'll find that there's a flex outlet plate. That's then fed from a fuse connection unit in a cupboard that's on the opposite side of this wall. So rather than having the FCU and switch in the bathroom, I put a flex outlet plate there and kept the FCU out the cupboard, so out the bathroom, so that's how that's powered. Now, the final thing is the soil pipe, and this is going to upset a lot of people because I'm using flexible stuff. But if you remember before, I had the single bit flexi toilet connector thing coming out there and going onto a pan connector that was meant to go in the toilet. And I mentioned that the sort of pan connector in this toilet is really deep in, and that meant that I wouldn't be able to, I'd have to like use a second pan connector to extend it, and that was a nightmare, it just ended up leaking and stuff. So I have bodged it and just got another flexible pan connector and sort of connected the two together here, and that comes into the toilet, and that's just a lot easier than trying to use all the fixed size ones and try and get the length. Just using a flexible one makes it so much easier, especially for this particular toilet where it's really deep in. And this is definitely going to upset people, but equally I'm a DIYer, I don't really know what I'm doing, and it's been working fine for 6 months without any issues. So yeah, that's there, and I've just sort of used a zip tie, just sort of hold it up off the ground at an angle, just so it has a decent fall on it. If I was doing this again, what I would probably do is there's the second flexible pan connector there goes through into the wall and into this sort of pipe box. Shortly after it enters this pipe box, it connects onto a solid bit of waste pipe. In hindsight, what I should probably do is actually extend that bit waste pipe out so the solid piece comes all the way out to here. So I'm only using one bit of flexible pipe, a shorter length that connects onto a solid piece here, but it's already in. I don't fancy ripping apart this wall again to change it, so it works fine. You'll also notice that I've now painted the room, so I've just painted it all white, so that's a bit neater. Ultimately, I'm going to put a big mirror up here. There's little bits I need to finish, like I need to sand that bit down and repaint it where the plasterboard joins, but it's basically there, but I'm going to put a big mirror up here. As an additional thing that I didn't really mention before, I've also fitted some downlights, so there's where the old single LED bulkhead was. I've now got 3 downlights in. These are JCC FireGuard Gen 2s or whatever they are, with little individual GU10 bulbs in it. I don't like integrated LED downlights, so that's what I've put in. And the one thing I did find is that when I put normal GU10s in this, like 38-degree beam angle ones, it cast quite a big shadow on the wall because they're quite close to the wall and there's not many. So I ended up going for like 110-degree angle GU10s. They've got a really wide beam angle, and that's a lot better because the problem was that the 38-degree ones would cast like individual shadows or individual spots of light for each light, and it meant that the shadows were really harsh. And if you're standing in the shower, you'd only get light from the light above you, and you'd end up with just shadows on you. So by replacing it with these GU10s, it made a much nicer sort of even spread of light, so that's what I've done there. So yeah, that's basically it all done. So I have sort of very much fast forwarded with the project, but realistically what needs done now is obviously put the panels back on. They are ready, they're just, I'll take them off to show you in the video. Get a worktop sorted for here, which I think previously I mentioned I was going to get a custom cut white one, but in hindsight I'm thinking, first of all I'd have to do that, and that's additional cost. Second of all, with the white walls, I think it might be a bit too much having a white worktop, and I've already got a spare bit of offcut of this material the Vanity units are made from that I used to cut off to make this filler panel, and that's the perfect size for that worktop. So I'm just going to cut a bit of that down and just stick it in here as a worktop, and even if I change it later, that'll be a good thing to start off with. Yeah, let's see what else I've done. So yeah, painted it, replaced this access cover with a new one. It's the exact same as the old one, just a bit cleaner. The old one was a bit grotty and a bit sort of chewed up where people have been using screwdrivers to get into it. But yeah, that's really it there. Oh yeah, and one other thing behind this access panel is I mentioned also I'm putting a mirror in. Ideally, I want a mirror that's got a built-in like demister pad, so it heats itself up so it doesn't steam up. So what I've done here is in here I've got a coil of cable just sort of stored, just stuck in a Wago box. This is for that mirror. So basically, this is fed from the downlight above the shower. So this is switched by the light switch. So what I'll probably end up doing is basically drop that down inside the pipe box, bring it out along the bottom, poke it through the wall under the toilet somewhere, bring it up through the wall, because there's nothing horizontal across that wall, and bring that into the back of the mirror. And that means that if I have a demister pad in the mirror, it'll be switched on and off with the lights. I think that's probably what I would rather do, so that's why I've put that in, also because I was already doing the lights, so it was very easy to put that in there. But I think that's what I'll do, so I can have it switched on and off with the lights. If instead I change my mind and decide that I want it powered permanently, so I use the button on the mirror to turn it on, I could easily enough come off the shaver socket, which is also on the lighting circuit as a permanent supply, and have it permanently powered. But I think I'll probably end up powering it off the switch, just so I don't have to manually turn a demister pad on, because I know I'll never remember to do it. So yeah. So yeah, basically all I need to do is get all the panels back on, get that worktop in place, silicone it all on and around the sink, then start the skirting boards because they're still currently not on. You can see it's a bit of a mess, but the new skirting boards I've got are 20mm higher than the old ones, so they'll cover a bit of that rubbish, so they'll basically hide all the damage, which is good. And yeah, that'll really be it. Still need to get the mirror in, but that's on the list of things to do in the future. Oh, and kick the access panel. And then the other thing I want to do here, I also need to probably put either beaded caulk or silicone around the ceiling, just where they join, it's a bit rubbish up there. And I also want to replace this radiator at some point with a towel rail. I'm not going to do that right now because currently my boiler's on its last legs. Like, it's got a very small drip from the bottom of it, and it's the little LCD display on the front's gone out now, so it's evidently about to die imminently. I'll probably get it replaced over the summer, but ideally I don't want to tempt fate by trying to like drain the heating system and then repressurize it to replace a radiator. I'd rather just leave it for now, just keep it going, and then once I get a new boiler, I'll then replace the radiator. Or if I've got someone in replacing the boiler, I might just see how much it would cost for them to also just swap the radiator out at the same time. But yeah, I'll swap that with a towel rail eventually as well. But that probably won't be in this video though. So yeah, all I need to do now is, well, get these panels back in, get it all siliconed, and then, well, maybe I've got time to get the skirting boards on, but I might leave that to net and not bother showing that in this video because it's just skirting boards, it's not very exciting. But yeah, time to get this all assembled. And we're back. So, as you can see, I've now reassembled all this. So I've put all the panels back in, so we've got the filler panel in here, the toilet and everything with the flush button, that's all installed, and I've put a worktop in. My original plan was to get a sort of white bit worktop here to match the sink and put it across and ideally get something a bit thicker that would match the height of the sink. But I was just putting it off and not ordering it and didn't want to spend the money, and it was just, I was living in a building site, never finishing it. But I already had a big piece of wood that I used to make this filler panel here, and I had some left over, so I just cut it down and made it into a worktop. And actually I kind of like it, because with the white wall, I feel if that was a white worktop, it might be a little bit too just all white and sort of be really bright and blend into the wall. Whereas that wooden one actually works quite well. The only thing is, it might come across on camera, the silicone job I did is a bit rough. The problem was, it was one of those classic jobs where when I start it, I have no idea what I'm doing and I mess it up. And by the time I finish it, I've actually got the technique down quite well and I was doing it quite nicely. But I stupidly did the first ones on the wooden worktop where it really shows up, and then did the perfectly neat ones on the sink, which you don't see because it's white. So that's a bit annoying, so I'll probably take it out at some point and redo it. The problem as well is that this wall is not remotely at a right angle, and the sink's not remotely at a right angle because that wall's not straight, so I had to use quite a big bead to fill in all the gaps, but it'll do the job. I can always take it off and re-silicone it later. I could even replace that worktop if I wanted to, but at least it's now assembled. So that's all in there now. We can also look down here and we can see the flooring. So I absolutely love this flooring. It's so nice to walk on, especially compared to like hard tiles. It's not warm, but it's not cold. It's just room temperature, really easy to clean, feels really waterproof. I really, really like it. And it was so easy to put down. So really happy with the LVT flooring. Quite like the contrast as well between the grey flooring and the slightly brown grey wood. It's not all grey, there's a little bit of brown in it. It's really, really nice. So realistically, I'm basically there. There's still a couple of little bits I need to do. I need to put the skirting boards on, so I just need to tidy that plasterboard up down there, and I'll probably just silicone them all because it's all a bit messy down there, but I won't do that in this video because it's just skirting boards and I need to paint it, caulk it, need to repaint all the wood as well because it's all a bit yellowed, so there's a lot of additional work that would just drag the video on, but skirting boards need to go on, so just when you're looking at it, imagine there's a skirting board there. Just pretend there's one there and it'll all be fine. And then I need to put the mirror in because there isn't one currently, but that should be relatively easy to do. I'm going to get a nice big wide one that basically fills the entire width of this wall, maybe like 10 centimetres either side without a mirror, but quite a wide mirror. and then it'll be heated with a light and demister pad and everything in it, so that'll be really neat. So yeah, there was a sort of interesting video where I attempt to refit a bathroom, which is generally a bit beyond my sort of level of DIY. I normally do a bit more simple stuff, but it actually turned out pretty well. The project definitely dragged on just because I got it working and never got around to finishing it, but I'm really happy with the end result. And doing this myself saved an absolute fortune. I think all in for this entire thing, well, all this and the flooring, I think it was about 1,400 quid, so relatively cheap. So yeah, really, really happy with how this turned out. So I know I'm inevitably going to get a lot of hate from people who are, you know, oh, you did it wrong, oh, you didn't do it this way and all this sort of stuff, but I'm happy with it. And the fact it's been, 6 months since I sort of did the initial sort of build of all this and I've not had any issues, I'm generally pretty happy with it. So yeah, there you go. Thank you very much for watching.